Hey, this lesson is going to be about variables, and we're going to be outputting some variables out into the console and taking a closer look at how we can assign values to variables. So essentially what variables do is they allow us to update values that are associated with those variables. So let's say, for instance, you have a variable, let's call it score, and we start out with a score of 0. And throughout the gameplay, you want to update the value of score. So you want to increment it maybe by 1. And then lastly, also you want to check to see what current value of score is at this point within the application. So you can do all of that with JavaScript. So we've set the value of score to 0. We've incremented it by 1. And then we're taking a look and we're seeing what gets output for score. So let's use Node and we're going to run app.js. And we see that the value of score is being returned back as 1 within the console. So that means that on line 3, the value of score now has updated and the value is equal to 1. The data type that we're using to associate the value of score is going to be a number. There's also several other different data types that you can use in JavaScript. So ones that we're going to be looking at are several other primitive data types such as strings and booleans. And there's also dynamic typing with JavaScript, so you can really easily switch between the different data types. So we've got the value of score being output into the console. If we type score, we can see that the value that's being returned is 1. If we do a type of score, this is going to return back the data type of the variable. Let's update score, and we're going to set score to a string value, and strings are referenced by having quotes around a value. You can also have multiple spaces in there as well. You can use a single or double quotes as well as backticks. So we're going to look at that a little bit later on in the lessons. So when we update score and we reassign a value of a string, it's going to automatically change the data type that's associated with that variable of score. So now if I do type of score, it's going to return back that this type of data type of the variable is now a string. So it's no longer a number, it's now a string that's being returned back. And if we ever want to return back whatever value is associated with score, we can just type in score and it's going to return back the value that's currently being associated with it. There's also one other data type that we wanted to look at in this lesson, and those are going to be booleans. So booleans are very simple. They can either be true or false. So let's update score and set a boolean value of true to score. So now if we do type of and type in the variable name score, we get returned back that this is a boolean value. So there's only two options for booleans, and that's going to be either true or false. So let's set up score and set that to false. And just like we saw with the numbers, we don't need to use the quotes around the assigned value for the variable, if it's a boolean or if it's a number. So now we've set it to false. Let's take a look at score, and this is still a boolean value. If we take score and if we use quotes around it, around true, so what do you think, what type of data type do you think score is going to be? Let's check it out. Go score, and if you said string, you're correct, because remember, we used the quotes around the value, and then that turned it into a string value. And that, therefore, we're using it as a string value within JavaScript, and it automatically changed it into a string value using the dynamic typing from within the JavaScript engine. I'll give you a few more examples of dynamic typing and how the JavaScript engine transfers from one data type to the next, depending on what your statement says and what you're trying to do with the variable. And just to go back a little bit, let's turn the value of score back into a number. And we also saw that if we do score plus, that adds 1 to the score. So that's the same thing as reassigning the value of score to score plus 1. And if we do that to a string, it's going to simply add the value of 1 to the end of the string. So if we do that a number of times, it will continuously add the value of 1 to the string, because of course it's treating it as a string and it's not adding it as a number. So let's say we take score and we assign a value of 10 to it. So what type of data type is score now? And if you said score is a string, you are correct, because this is a string value. And if we take score and we do plus, on score, we're going to get returned back a value of 10. And so right now the value of score is 11. So JavaScript is also smart enough to know that if the value, even though that the value of score was a string, it automatically converted it because we were reassigning the value of it and we were adding 1 to it. And this is typical for numbers. So with the dynamic typing, it changed it to a numeric value. So now if I do type of score, we see that it's changed into a number and it's added 1 to it. So even though that we started with a string, we turned it into a number. So what happens if I do score and if I equal it to 10, and then if I do score equals score plus 1, what do you think the outcome will be? And because now it's treating it as it would any other string, where we're concatenating a string with a number, we're ending up with a string value, because this could be anything. We could want to keep it as a string, and when we're adding 1 to a string, then the same thing that happened over here where we had a value of true for the string value and we were adding 1 to it, it simply concatenates it to the end of the string. So now it remains a string, but if we use the shorthand method where we do the plus plus, then this will convert it into a number, because this is what is typically done with numbers in JavaScript. So try it out. Try out some of the different variables and write out some of the different data types available in JavaScript. And you can be ready to move on to the next lesson.